or accomplishment is it looking forward to? The FM's job is to take that information and not just go straight to, we know where the organization is going to be at this point, we deliver to this level, and then we know where it's going to be at that point, we deliver to that level. No, you don't just start delivering. You also create your own strategic plan. It is based on your strategic plan that you can now say, okay, so what maintenance approaches are we going to adopt? What kind of contracting strategy are we going to adopt? Where are we going to locate? Where are we going to, do we expand? Do we contract? Do we rent? Do we lease? Do we buy equipment? You know, all those big questions happens after we know why we are doing what we are doing. Okay, so once you have spent enough time understanding the organization's high-level strategy, you now see yourself as fully immersed in the organization, just like the people in the C-suite, the directors and the MD and chairman. They are the ones that really have the vision. You've spent enough time understanding what this vision is, understanding that you have done because you have looked historically, look at the data historically, and you can plot, a forecast. This is for the organization. So all of those analyses, what are strengths, weakness, opportunities, and threats, and all the other things we've done in the analyze and then the going into the planning phase. The whole idea at that level, in fact, still at this level, is to have a full understanding. When we have a full understanding, we now sit back and say, okay, so as a facility management department, real estate department, property management department, whatever organization or department or division, whatever the organization calls it, that unit, that manages the physical facilities, plants, machineries, buildings of the organization will need to sit down and say, let's create a strategic plan. So they start at the level of, which is the highest level of FM strategy, which is called the strategic facility plan. What we call the strategic facility plan is, is a portfolio. It's a set of guidelines or rules that governs how physical facilities are going to be acquired, managed, operated and maintained, and disposed of in the course of the facility that we are managing. So it's important that we understand that. Sorry, 1 second. I need to the quick. Okay. So we will need to develop a document that guides the entire process. So if we have to have a facility, have a location, what guides how we select the location? Whether we're going to buy, build, or lease or rent, what guides that? What are the long-term objectives, that we must achieve with every site that we acquire, right? So once we do, and then what are the guidelines for site development? What are the benchmarks or performance benchmarks or metrics that every site that we cite, that we create and deploy for the use of our organization must achieve, for us to say we are following this plan? That is the strategic facility plan. It starts with having a statement of facility objectives. If I'm the head of physical facilities in the organization, what are the strategic objectives of facility? What does facility contribute? This is speaking to key performance indicators, which are, critical benefits the organization gets from for the acquisition of its physical facilities. Those are statements of facility objectives. We will speak to things like what are goals regarding productivity, workplace productivity, how we want the workplace to be perceived. Sometimes workplace attracts talents. People you want to work for you may not want to work in the spaces that you have, right? So if we want to use our physical facilities to attract the best talents in the industry, you state that. If you want to have aesthetically pleasing premium appeal of your facility spaces, I mean, write down your objectives. If it's efficiency and economy that you are driving for, you want to have a space that is very efficiently run, that is the cost per square meters is within a certain threshold. You set, in terms of maintenance and operation, you set those objectives. So you are using a vision of what your ideal facility will do for the organization, will be for the organization, the kind of impact it will be making to set your facility objectives. So that's the first thing you do, because the facility objectives is what's going to guide everything else you do. Whether you're going to renovate, whether you're going to build or buy, whether you're going to do it in-house or outsource it, all of those things will come in later. So that's the first consideration. Statement of facility objective. Let them not be too many. Let them not be too complex. An objective should be a single objective. A line item should be a single objective. It shouldn't be we want to make the facility aesthetically pleasing and also efficiently managed and want to make it sustainable as one. No, each line item, because you want to be able to use these objectives to create key performance indicators that are going to go into metrics that you're going to be measuring for every site when the facility is in place, right? Then risk analysis of options. So this is basically if we're going to acquire a site, if we're going to acquire a facility today, right? What are the things we will consider? What are the things we will consider? Because there are some organizations that will tell you we don't rent. If we can't find a property to buy, we'll buy a land and build, right? So if you have such considerations and your preference is to buy a property, there must be certain risk analysis or certain conditions that property must meet in terms of the kind of locations we are looking for, the type of buildings we are looking for, the kind of area. Every area has its own zoning regulations where it says this area is residential, this area is retail, or business area is can be used for different things. What kind of zoning criteria are we considering for what they want to buy? What kind of utilities has to be around or within the property, and so on and so forth. We're analyzing just one of the options we're going to buy. If all the properties that are available in our chosen location or preferred area don't meet those analysis options, what do? We're falling back to the next one, which is to find a site and build. And if we're going to build, what kind of structures do we build? Are we building temporary structures, marquee tents? Are we building concrete structures, for life? Are we, whatever it is, there will be considerations. Now, these are high-level considerations. You also do sustainability analysis, so our impact on the environment in terms of energy, in terms of water, in terms of materials used, in terms of waste disposal and reuse, and so on and so forth. You list out sustainability considerations that say we will fall between this threshold and this threshold. Okay, for example, we want to have the ability to not put in more than 20% of our overall waste into landfill. We want to be able to recycle, reuse, 80% of solid waste from our site. We want to be able to treat and recycle and reuse our sewage so that we'll give out only less than 5% of sediments for other uses. And we're going to, so you're creating long-term goals, because if these things are not defined, one architect will design something for you somewhere, or one facility manager will, rent a building somewhere, and it is what you see, whatever is there is what you're going to take. Or an agent is trying to help you find a place to rent, because of course you have the option of renting if that's what you chose in the second option. And then you're getting to the building and you're like, oh, no, this is not going to help us achieve this goal and that objective. So it helps you have a big picture view of what kind of facility we can have, what kind of sustainability metrics we can have, what are the kind of energy sources we can look out for. Can we have a mix? Do we want to set targets for mix of renewable versus fossil fuels? Do we want to set targets for energy use per person, energy use per square meter, what we call energy use intensity targets? So you are setting those targets, and this is as an organization. So the strategic plan really is not something that the FM should just sit down and write. No, it comes up with all of these ideas and it takes it up to senior management. Senior management will have to say, yes, this really aligns with our corporate strategy and where the organization is going, and we would like to give back into this. It's eventually as adopted, approved by senior management, but the FM or the real estate manager, property manager, whatever nomenclature you have within the organization, somebody in charge of physical facilities should be able to come up with this, this guidebook that management will look into and say it really aligns with what we are looking for, right? Such as uses of funds, you also, have to mind that aspect. We organization have, how much of its annual revenue is typically spent on physical facilities, because organizations are not there just to spend all the money they have. They have to be a way of planning long term. Just like when we have a national budget or a state budget, and you're hearing things like, oh, we spend less than 10% on education, we spend less than 7% on health, and so on and so forth. Organizations should also have, this is the percentage of our revenue that we can part with for physical facilities related transactions, so that if you are developing a new site tomorrow and you are thinking about going high rise, build a 20-story or build just a 3 or 4 story, the trajectory of your organization is going to guide that decision. Because if you already have a strategic facility plan, these are the sources of funds, these are the expense to revenue ratio that we can adopt for facility capital spend or facility spending altogether, then I have my decision cut out for me already. Okay, so an organization that is doing very well, income is coming in, and we have a strategic facility plan that says so percentage can go into physical facilities, I can see that money will be there to finish a 20-story high rise and lease, sublet, whatever I want to do with extra space. As far as I'm seeing that the organization is going bigger, and over time we're going to fill up the whole place. And now we have the money because of what the strategic facility plan that has been approved by management says, right? Then operating expenses analysis. So you need to set benchmarks for, so if we have so grades, buildings have grade A, grade B, grade C, grade D, like that, right? So if you have adopted any of the grades as what you are really working towards, what kind of operating expenses should you look at? Or you can create options from number 2 there, where you have if we have need for this grade, then our operating expenses should be this cost per square meter, or that range between this cost and that cost per square meter. And then the people that use the facility, you could also have the targets as to how much per person for delivering various type of FM services or aggregates FM services. And every property, every facility that you invest in Yeah, I mean, it's a financial investment. Nobody gets a building for free. Everything you see, it costs initial cost. It also costs of ongoing running costs. And because of that, you must have some financial metrics. These financial metrics are things that help guide go no go decisions. For example, they guide milestone or phased planning. For example, you want to build something that big. Can we build it in small phases? When we're in the second or third phase, how can we tidy up to be able to start using to start getting value at so and so stage, right? Now, in all of this, you have to have set long-term targets for return on investment. If something sounds lucrative, something that we should do, sounds okay that we should do it, and I look at the return on investment, so it's going to cost this amount, it's going to give us this amount per this period as return. Does it meet our targets, ROI? Does it meet? So whether it's ROI, whether it's net present value, internal rate of returns, payback period, these are financial analysis that I use to set benchmark, so that before you even take anything to management to say, can they approve this investment for this and that, you already have a guide. You already have something that's already there to say, if it is not within this threshold or this range, we will not accept it, right? So you need to work on your project plans or your capital plans or your future plans to ensure that the benchmark set on the strategic facility plan for returns for every investment, you are meeting it. Sometimes the FMs or the real estate team don't have this kind of documents, right? And so they see themselves coming up, oh, we want to buy a new generator, want to build a new house, want to rent, want to acquire this and acquire that. And management is looking at the returns for every money they spend. So should we give it to marketing? Marketing says if they get that money, they're going to increase our revenue by 20%. 20% means we're going to get, extra 2 billion, for example, as revenue. And we know how much of that is profit. So they can easily calculate when the other business units are giving them financial metrics. What about the FM? The FM says, give me that same amount so that I can use it to buy vehicles, for example, or use it to renovate the office and make the place more productive. How do I calculate return on investment, so that it can be compared with what other business units in the organization are given? Because even when I finally get some wisdom to calculate my return on investment, I must make sure it meets the minimum threshold approved in the strategic facility plan. And then life cycle cost analysis, whole life cost analysis. The organization, we need to make decisions on, the kind of grades of materials we will use, the type of equipment we will install based on the life cycle, right? So what it means is that you have to have decisions already written in the strategic facility plan that you will do life cycle analysis for every acquisition you are going to make. What does that mean? Usually when you want to start a project, at the tactical level, where you want to start something, we need to build a crèche or an FM building, or want to build a fire station, or want to build a mall, or whatever we want to build. There's usually that bring the money, right? Let's see what options are there in the market, all right? And when we are looking at those options, we are often tempted to go for the one that make the most sense financially, only based on the initial investment sum. That's not life cycle. That's not whole life cost. I can buy something cheap today, but how long is it going to last? Is the first question. And how much am I going to put into it on an ongoing basis for its lifespan? And what am I going to get in return for that asset investment, right? So if I take a decision as an organization, take a decision now on what our focus will be on life cycle, it will be easy. It will be easy for us to take decisions that we're not going to go for the lowest. Some organizations will tell you, it's lowest bidder, always lowest bidder, right? or the lowest cost at the beginning. If you do that, you've not taken a long-term decision on life cycle approaches, then you may end up, getting your figures bumped on an ongoing basis, right? But again, if you already put it there as your policy that, we'll always go for the cheapest because time value of money means that we can always spend the higher money later, right? Put it there. Your strategic facility plan should be what drives. This is more like a policy book. Everything I'm touching on here is like a policy document or a procedure document, or some kind of strategic plan, or how would I put it? Something management will enact as this is something that binds us in this organization. Then look at cost-benefit rating of alternatives and recommendations with clearly stated assumptions. So what you're basically doing in strategic facility plan is putting together what I call your property acquisition, use and disposal manual. Okay, this is going to go feed into every decision you take regarding property in your organization. So by the time we have an office in Lagos, and we want to probably set up a production facility in Abeokuta, right? So we'll look at strategic facility plan and say, what kind of zone must it be? What are the options, risk analysis of options? Should we consider what sustainability analysis, sources and use of funds? All of these have been predefined. We'll use them as guidelines to start, doing searches. Are we searching for property? Are we searching for land? We are guided. When we find options, we say, okay, fine, let's do our analysis. Let's compare the options. Let's use our financial metrics. Somebody should come up with a set of drawings and a bill of quantities. Let's see the final estimated cost. Let's look at the return on investment. Let's look at the kind of materials we're buying for the roof. What kind of materials? What are the alternatives? How long does this material last before it starts giving a problem? How long does this other one start? For the walls, what should we use? For the floors, what should we use? Should we paint over plastered surfaces, or should we screed it? What is the difference? What are the alternatives? Those are what we are looking at. We are looking at long-term decisions. They're all long-term. Everything strategic is long-term. But in this case, we are building a guide. So your strategic facility plan is like your guide, your master book, your playbook, your documents, your Bible that has all of the pointers to how you can make decisions. That's how it is. Now, if I now get to Abeokuta and I want to build that factory, that production facility, I now need to work on the facility master plan. That site will have a master plan. The master plan is a long-term plan for how I'm going to acquiring is answered by strategic facility plan, but develop that property, build it out, whether in phases or months.
Are you guys getting audio from your end, from what you're broadcasting? You can hear me? Okay. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. It's my pleasure to reach you again today in another session of the FM Launch Hour. Last week, we started our asset management series. We looked at the differences between the assets and the inventory. We started by looking at the definition of assets and what asset means to different professional groups and you know, domains. And we now went into asset management from the standpoint of facility managers. Why should we have a strategic view to the entire process? Why should we have the life cycle approach to asset management? And we delved into that a bit, and we said we're going to continue today on the asset management series to talk about the asset register, which is that document that you need to have as something you have before you on a daily basis, that you update on a regular basis, that you use as your baseline for all asset management activities. So that's your asset register. So we're going to be looking at what the asset register is today. And then we're going to talk about specific information that should be captured and updated, kept alive in your asset register. So that's the focus of today's session. And before I dive right into it, I would like to, just tell you that exciting plan coming up in Max-Migold for the facility management industry. The graduation for the 2023 batches of the FM Diploma that is starting now, that we're planning for early December. More details will be rolled out. It's going to be a very grand industry epoch-making event, and we hope you all look forward to it. The current FM Mastercraft Diploma is still ongoing. Those who took the opportunity last week after my announcement of closure of admissions to join in are able to take advantage of our learning management system, where we have all the videos, the test materials, the quizzes, the textbooks, and all the other items that you can have access to on the learning management system. And I enjoin you to sit up, study hard, so that it will not be obvious that you came in late into the program. So from now on, we're working towards the January batch of the FMMC. And, we've given a lot of opportunities to everyone out there to make good their intention of joining the January batch by paying the current rates of 350,000 virtual and 450,000 physical. You might have seen that on our website. The prices have been adjusted to $399 and $499. Well, scratch that. The prices with effect from January will be $499 virtual and $399 physical, which is effectively $500,000 and $600,000. $499 virtual and $599 physical is the same thing as $500,000 for virtual classes and $600,000 for physical classes come January. So what you're even seeing on the website is really not going to stick or stand in January. So I'll then join you to take advantage of the 350 and 450 now by starting to make your payments towards the January class. We have close to 500 people who have promised they want to take the program, but for one challenge or the other have delayed. We're giving you the opportunity to lock in that old price so that you don't end up having to pay $500,000 or $600,000 for the program, because that is the reality of 2024. I'm sure you're all aware that the inflation has in Nigeria has hit the highest it has been for over 20 years right now, and our currency has devalued to the below the proverbial low level where everybody dreaded a year ago. When you hear about when you talk about dollar, coming so high, 500 was a dream, 700 was a dream, and we're looking at 1,000. That will never be crossed. It was crossed this week, right? And so reality is that the value of our currency is going down the drain, and we hope to be able to, maintain the value of our offering, of our services to you when you take on the program. So if you are still hoping that beyond January you are delaying to maybe April or August batches, I'm sure you're also going to be looking at that, moment where the FM Diploma will hit ₦1 million, because that's where we are all going. We just can't do anything about it as private individuals or organizations. We have to keep maintaining quality. We have to keep providing the services, and we have to find a way to pay for our own inputs into this. So that's our reality, and I just want you to share with your friends and your colleagues and everyone who's delaying on taking on the FM Diploma. If you want to really be grounded in facility management in Nigeria, you don't need to look elsewhere. This is not a short course. This is not a 2 day, 3 days refresher program. This is a 3 months comprehensive diploma in facility management package that also comes with projects work, as well as internship and job placement opportunities. So it's a start in life for some. It's an elevation for most. People have been in FM industry for 5, 6, 10 years, and they've not really grown. Somebody has been in this industry for 4 years, 3 years, even 5 years or more, and is still earning 60, 70,000. They've really been stuck. Career is not picking up, and that's because you really can't offer value when you don't know what to do. Strategic facility management it's a body of knowledge. There are series of practices. There are series of procedures and processes you must be aware of. You must be taught, and you must be taken through the discipline of implementing them through exercises and projects that the FM Diploma brings. And that's why it is a designational credential that you must look forward to. And for those who have gone through it, you can see the way their career has picked up. You see how many of them have changed jobs in the last 3 years, and how they have moved up in terms of salary earning capacity geometrically over the last few years. So don't waste time. Get on the registration link, promo.facilitymanagementcourses.com, and book a spot for yourself on this career-changing, life-defining program. All right, so straight into the asset management series. Don't forget, I already promised that as soon as we are done with the asset management series, we will be looking at the workplace productivity series. In fact, we're going to run the workplace productivity series all the way through to December, and there's a lot, and the workplace productivity series is actually for everybody. We're going to be going through series of lessons in management, in leadership, in emotional intelligence, in workplace, civility, in just about everything that's going to make you better in your life as an employee or as an entrepreneur. Okay, so after today's session on the asset register, we're going to go into next week, where we're going to look at asset maintenance. We're going to look at the maintenance aspects of managing assets. So we're going to look at maintenance strategy, and then another session on maintenance planning. And once we're done with those, we're going to take a session on financial management, how we financially stay accountable for the investments that go into the assets that we manage. And after that series, we'll move on to the workplace productivity series. This is also for the information of the Max-Migold team, so that the outlines will be updated for future classes. All right, so let's take a look at, so I've put a list of items, by no means exhaustive, right? By no means exhaustive. When you're developing an asset register, you want to gather as much information as possible about the asset. So something like a picture, an embedded image of the asset, for example, is not on my list here. Okay. So you can come up with so many other items that will be needed in your asset register. So when I talk about an embedded image of the asset, just to get a sense of what kind of asset it is. If somebody says air conditioner, what kind of description has been given in the various columns that this spreadsheet have carried already, and can I see what it looks like? It's possible that I've not put a proper description in any of the column. For example, there's asset description there, but in asset description, I could use my discretion to add color, for example, add indication of the size or dimensions, but that might not be sufficient to give me a clear picture. Should I be handing over to someone to manage the asset? For example, they want to know the difference between the white one in so and so office, the gray one in so and so space, and so on. Okay, so that's the first point. Many items are not captured. You can add as many items as you want. The second point I need to spell out is you can't begin to develop your asset register without first creating what I call your space hierarchy. Your space hierarchy is a breakdown of your site, to that broken down into specific spaces. So how do you develop a space hierarchy? You have a site. I have a campus, for example, an educational campus. On that campus, I have a lecture theater. I have a hostel block, and I have an admin block, right? So my entire assets are all contained within these three structures in this site. So the title of my document is going to be Assets Register for XYZ Campus. That is the title of the document, right? So I don't, that's the highest level of the hierarchy. Then the next level of that hierarchy is now going to be the blocks, right, or buildings. So if I have 3 buildings, it means that level 2 is not the site. Level 1 is the site on that hierarchy. Level 2 is the building. So I'm going to have the building name while building my developed by site hierarchy. So building 1 is lecture theater. Building 2 is administrative block. Building 3 is accommodation or hostel blocks, right? Hostel block. So I have those 3. Now, I'm going to pick one of those and further develop it, stretch it out. So from building, what are the next level breakdown for the building? I could have, I could have zones where I have external areas and internal areas for the building. So that will be 2 zones. Okay. If I pick zone 1 for building A, for example, which is the internal area of the building, I can break that into floors if it's multi floors, the stacking plan. So I now have floor 1, floor 2, floor 3, and so on and so forth. All right. And then in every floor, depending on the design, I could have wings, wing A, wing B, and in every wing, I will have the actual spaces. So I can have, take a theater, a lecture block, for example. I could have an architecture studio, architecture studio 1 as the name of the space, right? And that architecture studio 1 is on wing B or wing A in floor 2 of internal areas of building A, lecture halls or lecture building. Right. So what I've just done is whenever I pick a space, that space can be traced, back in the hierarchy like a tree. So that's the site. It starts with the site, opens into 3, opens into three buildings on the site. Then each building opens into 2 internal and external spaces, because in external I'm going to have garden area, sit-out area, gazebos, generator area, utility areas, diesel dump. I'll have different zones. The way I'll have zones of floors in the internal area, I'm also going to have that in the external. So that opens up, and then I get to the level of a floor and of a space. An identifiable space is needed, because every time you identify an asset in your asset register and you want to put that asset into your asset register, you must identify exactly where that asset is located. So when you get to that point where you have asset location, instead of having asset location as just a random name of the space must be located within that tree, within that hierarchy of how that, let's say toilet, male toilet in the architecture studio in wing A of floor 2, right, of building X, right? So that is what we're talking about when I'm talking about space hierarchy. So every time you want to start thinking about your assets, you must think about individual assets with regards to where they are located. So if you ask me to make this simple for you, I'll build that space hierarchy in a spreadsheet. So all of my spaces have been created like a tree diagram in a spreadsheet in Excel, for example, right? And then once that is done, I can now begin to identify the assets within each space. So I'll go to the lowest level on the space hierarchy and start, building the assets that exist in there. So a toilet room that has a wash and basin, for example, is identified to that room. So that wash and basin is identified as located in that toilet room. Which specific toilet room is within the a certain identified space in the floor, wing, zone, whatever you decide to create as your location or space hierarchy. So that wash and basin is distinct from the wash and basin in another space, the same way you would do for air conditioning and the rest. So that's the foundation I would like you to have when thinking about your asset register. Start from that whole development process of creating your space hierarchy. So that way, when you think about an asset, you're thinking about where it is located, and you will not miss out any assets from your asset register. There's been all kinds of issues. I'm going to talk about more about how we use the asset register when we get to things like maintenance strategy, because many of us have, basically just abandoned some of our assets because we don't have to work on it on a daily basis. We don't even have it on record. We don't have our asset register of most of the things that are, static in our facilities, because we don't necessarily need to carry out maintenance on them. So starting with the asset hierarchy, you have an opportunity to have a comprehensive asset register. All right. So now that I've giving you an idea on how to create an asset hierarchy, let's go into the additional columns. So if I build the hierarchy level this in this column, the next level in the next column, the next level in the next column, the next level in the next column, I built it down to the space, maybe after about 4 or 5 columns. So I can have like 4 or 5 columns of my space hierarchy. So when I get to a space, on the line of that space, let's assume it's a toilet room, certain measurements that need to be captured for that toilet need to go in there. For example, the dimension, the height, the width, the length, and so on and so forth. Then I'll now go into the assets that are in that space, starting from the wall finishing, if it's tiles, what type of tiles, I'll create columns to describe each asset I have in that space. The whole idea here is you want to be able to account for everything that you spend money. We define assets as whatever the organization spends money on that gives it value in return, right? So you cannot have an asset register that's missing out most of the things you have, like your wall covering, your doors and windows, your lights, things that are fitted into it. Don't just assume that room is that room, right? No, that room has components that need to be identified, and they'll be repetitive because the next room probably have the same types of components, right? You repeat them in that space again, and then their dimensions might be different, okay? But at the end of a detailed work, when you have done those repetition of the same type of materials repeating themselves in different spaces, you'll be able to use filtration in Excel to filter for, say, you want to upgrade your facility and replace all the porcelain tiles or ceramic tiles you have in the in the restroom floors. It will be easy to just filter, get all the ceramic tiles out in that spreadsheet, and then use dimensions and areas that you've already created columns for to come up with total area, square meters of all porcelain or ceramic tiles you have in the building. So it becomes easy when you are doing budgeting, for example, to say, if we're upgrading our floors to more modern tiling, it will be so and so square meters and so and so cost for our budget, and it covers everything in the facility. If you're looking at air conditioning, for example, and you filter, you come up with total number of ACs. You can, arrange them, sort them according to their sizes and different dimensions you've already captured in your spreadsheet. It gives you visibility. And when you're creating your maintenance program, to design, to impute whatever strategy for different types of maintenance or different assets, they require different strategies. We'll talk about those strategies next week. You'll be able to apply directly, because you can now have a full reckoning of everything from the micro level aggregated for the entire facility because of this work that you have done. So the asset name is something that you must capture. This is what you typically call the assets. So if it's air conditioner, if it's television, if it's wall fans, ceiling fans, monitor, furniture table, whatever kind of, I just give the name there. The capacity will be different for different types of assets, right? So some assets, the capacity is measured in 1 unit, maybe kilowatts rather, or amps. Electrical assets, some are measured in the number of people they can take. Take elevator, for example. It's a 13-man elevator, even though there are other means of measuring capacity for elevators and so on and so forth. So, and then some pumps, in horsepowers, air conditioning in British thermal units or horsepowers and so on and so forth. So you put the capacity. Now, certain assets have their identification of the model. All right. So air conditioning, mostly electronics and mechanical assets will have a model number. The model number is identifying a particular make, a particular design, particular production, not a batch, but a particular type or class amongst the range produced by that manufacturer. So capture that for those that have. For those that don't have, leave it blank. For example, you wouldn't have model number for wall coverings. You won't have model number for window blinds, for example, depending on what type of installations you have, right? So you leave that space blank. And then some assets are individually, identifiable using serial numbers. Your IT assets, most electronic devices will have a serial number. Most equipment that have pumps, machines, they all generators, they all have identifying numbers, right? You need to capture them. And for some, you have 2 serial numbers, depending on the kind of asset. For example, you could have a a generator that has an alternator, come from one source, coupled with an engine from another source, and they are both identifiable separately. So while you put in generator in your asset register, you will have to have this number and that number captured in your asset register as well. So that means you might have it as 2 line items. If you are handling a central air conditioning system that's made up of several components that all have, come from different manufacturers. Sometimes they all have, a way of identifying them serially differently, like the fan coil units, the air handling units, and then the chiller units, for example. They could all have different identifiers. It's important that you capture as much detail as possible in your asset register. Okay. And then we've talked about the location, because you've already built your asset hierarchy, space hierarchy rather. All of these assets have now been identified in their various spaces. So if I'm working within an asset register that is a template developed out of the space hierarchy, I don't need a column for the asset location anymore, because I'm working right into that location. I'm adding rows under that location to add up the assets from that location. A column for asset condition. Why should you have this column? Is very important, because as at the time you are developing an asset register, maybe you didn't meet it, or you're trying to validate it, the one that you were given. You need to be able to ascertain the condition of the asset, right? The condition as at a particular time is determined by the kind of defects you see around it. Sometimes defects might be cosmetic. Sometimes it might be deep-rooted. See things like vibration, scratches, different things that might be indicative of its life so far, the wear and tear that it has gone through so far. So that's too, the aesthetic view of what you see, the functionality that you observe, vibration, temperature, noise level, all of those things. And then the third indicator of condition is output, right? So if something is rated for a certain output, is it giving that output? Is it struggling to give that output, for example? Are we now using it for lesser than its design capacity because it is now weaker? Now, if I put these 3 factors together, I can now give it a rating. So when it comes to condition here, it's me creating a rating to say brand new, good, brand new, very good, good, which makes it still functional, no complaints, no much defects, fairly, manageable. I can say fair, and then I can say poor, right? So if I create this 1 to 4, 1 to 5, 1 to 6 condition grading, I'll indicate it, in the legend or key of my asset register to say this is how I determine. So I'll put a little bit of description for each of those grades to say this is how I came up with the condition of the various assets. So I put maybe a number, a figure, whatever I've done to grade conditions. I put it there because the time I do an asset register, maybe I created this asset register this year, I've updated. Every year, even though I work with the asset register on a regular basis, right? I do all those my maintenance based on it. All my activities, inspections, operations, and so on is based on the asset register as my working tool. On an annual basis, I still need to revisit, have a project to revalidate, review, edit, cross-check the facts or the data I have in my asset register. So I review and revise this condition again to see whether it is still exactly the condition it was last year. Sometimes events, over the year might have led to more faster deterioration that moves it from fair to poor, I'll make that change. And then I need to capture some information about the origin of the assets, right? The date of purchase, the price of purchase, date of installation, because sometimes I could have, acquire the assets, take a pump, a massive submersible pump, 40 horsepower that, I had in the store, still in its crates for 3 years or 2 years before I needed it, right? The date of purchase might be 3 years ago, but the date of purchase may not give me enough information to judge what the pump has gone through. If I didn't capture the date of installation, that's why you see, I told you there's so many things that are not on this list that will be relevant to your asset register. So I want to know exactly when it was installed, because when it was installed gives me an indication of when it was put to use and the wear and tear started on that equipment, right? So it's very important that I have dates and I have price. The reason I need to have indication of the price is when the asset gets to a certain point in its life, we'll talk about that, estimated useful life and the end of life actions, activities that need to take place. I need to replace. I need to have a way of, calculating how the cost, how much it cost me 10 years ago or 15 years ago, compared to today, right? You all that we talk about time value of money, net present value, and the rest. So it's not going to be, oh, I bought it 1 million then, now I'm buying it for 10 million. It's too expensive. No. That's not what we're talking about. 1 million then could be, 20 million now. So it's even possible that buying it 10 million today is cheaper than 1 million 10 years ago, right? So I use that kind of information for that financial decision later. Okay, so sometimes you're taking over an old asset and you don't know. You just don't know when the asset was acquired, right? You can try to get information as to when the building itself was delivered. When the building itself was delivered, so that you can link everything that was installed or started their life with the building, and use that date for them. Now, you may not be too precise, but it's important that you have as close as possible to the nearest 1 year. Okay, as close as possible to the nearest 1 year can be helpful, so that you can use that as your benchmark or gauge for the age of the various components. For example, you need to know the age of the roof, the plumbing system, electrical system, and all of those things that are built into your facility. If in the history of the facility or the equipment there had been any change over time, if there had been any change or any if there had been any change or any new additions to the assets, any improvement or upgrades that have been done, it will be important to know when that took place, so that you can, because certain things are ripped out and replaced. So you can, it's possible to have a building that is 50 years old and the roof is not 50 years old, right? The windows are not 50 years old, and so on and so forth. The plumbing system may not be 50 years old, right? So you need to have that information, so you can have the precise dates to work with in your asset register. And then the asset manufacturer, if you know model number and serial number, of course, you will know the manufacturer. Sometimes manufacturer is no longer in existence or no longer in play in the industry, but at least information regarding, because if you don't know, you probably won't have access to information on spares, whether you should continue to use the assets, whether you should pack it up, and so on and so forth. Okay. And then, of course, a brief description of the assets. You need to have a column where you describe it, because you really can put all features, all considerations into columns in a spreadsheet, right? So you can use the description to capture qualitative information that have not been captured by the various columns you're creating in your asset register. And then if the asset is insured, indicate it, what kind of insurance. If the asset is still under warranty, what dates those warranty cover, and you might make another column to identify key features of the warranty provisions, so that you will be able to indicate that, because sometimes there's warranty, and then you go seeking the redress from that warranty, and they tell you, oh, sorry, it doesn't cover this, it doesn't cover that, and you'll be left unprepared for the next step. So talk about the date the asset is placed in service, so that's the date it's installed. Estimated life of the asset. Now there are two life cycle considerations that you need to make. First is, from when an asset is installed, we have the estimated useful life. Estimated useful life, EUL. So I can install an AC, a split unit air conditioning system, and because of my knowledge and experience with other split units in this area, typically 10 to 12 years, I say mine is going to be for 12 years, right? So that's the estimated useful life. I can get that from my experience. I can get that from manufacturer's recommendation in the manuals that come with it. You typically hear of generator manufacturers telling you about certain overhaul you need to do when it's 10,000 hours. That 10,000 hours can become your benchmark for indicative expected or estimated useful life, right? And so your experience, manufacturers' recommendations can give you that indication. And then the experience of others, benchmark studies on how others have used certain assets can also help you, indicate your rough estimate of your estimated or expected useful life. Now, but sometimes the assets is in place, even though whether or not you know when it was installed and how old it is, your understanding of its current condition you should be able to give what we call an estimated or remaining useful life, right? So when it was installed, the estimated useful life for whatever the EUL was 10 years or 12 years. Now I'm probably at 3 years to the end of that 12 years. But the condition of these assets is so bad that I don't necessarily need to stick with that EUL of 12 years. I need this asset replaced within 1 year because it is epileptic, it's expensive to run, it's, and so on and so forth. I have, several reasons for assessing it, all right? So I'm now dealing with remaining useful life as my number, okay? So that's what I'll put in for old assets. I'll use remaining useful life. I won't use the expected or estimated useful life that was indicated at the beginning, especially if I didn't get the asset register, at that point. Because I'm creating it now, the asset is old, and the condition is not telling that it's going to do me 3-4 years more. I'll say the remaining useful life is 1 year, and then I'll talk about things like the salvage value at the end of the useful life of these assets. What can it do? What can it be useful for? What can I do with it? Can I resell it secondhand? Maybe there are people who know how to tune it back and use it again. I've seen generators being overhauled the first time, second time after 15,000 hours, and maybe another 20,000 hours they don't have overhauling again, and they still keep pushing it, right? Or is it possible for me to cannibalize it, get some spares for me to work on other equipment, as is very common with air conditioning units, where we can take out the compressor, take out the condenser, take out the evaporator, take out the capillary tube, take out whatever can work, also a capacitor and the rest, and arrange them in stores again, waiting for opportunities to be used to repair other assets, or sell it out to other people who know how to, break it down and sell the components. Whatever it is, what am I going to get as the owner of the assets? Is that going to be a positive or a negative? Now, it is going to be a positive if I'm going to get money. Maybe a recycling revenue or a resale revenue. But if it's going to cost me money to take it out of my space and probably discard it, spending money on it, then my salvage value is negative, right? It's important that we understand exactly how our assets are going to end. Is it going to bring us something? Is it going to cost us something? And then you now need to assign an asset identification number. This is something you do internally. Your asset identification number is something you create. You can formulate it into a code using an indicator of location, an indicator of asset category, an indicator of asset type. For example, you could have a category you've already developed for your assets. For you have electrical assets, you have mechanical assets, you have plumbing assets, you have civil assets, right? So those are categories, right? So if I take mechanical assets, I'll say, so generating assets is a type under category mechanical, and air conditioning assets is a type under category mechanical, right? So I could use a short code for mechanical, maybe that's M, type air conditioning, so I can have MAC, right? And then maybe a subtype under AC, splits, window, fan coil, whatever the categorization I have under that. So I can create a string, right, that follows a certain set of codes, so that for any asset that you see a number, you that assigned it that number can interpret that number to say this is the second air conditioner in the conference room on the first floor, and this air conditioner is a split unit AC and it's a mechanical category asset, right? You will understand it. So this is the kind of information that when we move into technology adoption for asset management, we want to provide a QR code that will replace that ID, for example. It is that same ID that will feed into that software to generate a QR code for it. So that once we put that QR code on the assets, the ID itself, that number could also be there, in that sticker or whatever, item you're going to use to provide that information on the body of the assets. Whoever comes in there can either look at the number, the ID number, or just scan the QR code and get straight into that whole portal where that particular asset, all the details you have captured about it is stored for easy asset retrieval or information retrieval. So that's my, pretty much summation of the asset register. I started out, talking about the asset space hierarchy, and then I went into the various items we can capture in our asset register. And then I talked about, a bit of what we can do for asset tagging, and how to create identification that we can label with. What we are advocating now is instead of living in the era of spreadsheet for asset management, which is like pretty much 1990s, in 2020s, we should be looking at having a software approach where the data is captured, and whether you're using RFID, barcodes, QR codes, your phones, different kind of scanners can scan and have access into the information that are stored about your assets. All right, so that's our session for today. I'm going to also include, I probably want to include a session on technology, asset management technology, how to implement technology. So probably you need to look forward to 3 more sessions or 4 more sessions in the asset management series on this weekly series that we've started, because I want to have a technology session added to it. I'll make a list of this and make it run through our daily posts on social media, so you can stay active and connected with what we have planned for you on a weekly basis. All right, so that's our lesson for today on the asset register. You can drop your questions now. I hope you've been listening and taking notes. Drop your comments and your questions here on this Teams chat. I should be able to see what questions you have on the chat here. And then if we have questions on our YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn pages, I would join our team members in manning those pages. So please drop the questions on the Teams chat so that we can give answers to them. A couple of weeks ago, while this session was ongoing on Telegram, somehow the Telegram group was hacked, and we've been announcing to members to be careful what's going on there. We don't know what whoever hacked the Telegram group is doing with it. It knocked us out, and many of our members on that facility management training Telegram group don't have access to it anymore. We're still trying to see what we can do with Telegram and to have our group back. But that's where we are right now. So please don't entertain any conversation or any interactions or transactions with whoever is on the facility management training Telegram group, because we no longer have access to it due to a hack. All right, your questions. Still waiting for questions. If you're here, you can drop a question, you can drop a comment and note. Don't forget to write us recommendations on any of the platforms where you are, and share the links with your network to join our platforms. Like, share, so that we can have a wider reach. Right. So thank you so much. If your questions come in at any time on this Teams chat, we'll still be able to answer it at any time. The Teams will always be on even if the session ends, because it's a channel we've created. All right. Have a nice day, and see you again next week for another interesting launch hour session. Bye-bye.